Hello, hello. Welcome to today's webinar. Just as a quick start off here, everyone knows that COVID-19 has had varying degrees of devastating impact on people's lives. It's really hurt economies both locally and globally. However, the virus has created a bit of a niche market for restoration companies who are willing to adapt. So making sure that your safety processes during this time are as sharp as possible is super important. And it's a great use of maybe some of the downtime that you've got. So done correctly, restoration companies providing COVID-19 disinfection services have the opportunity to change the tides in getting our economy back to work and making a lot of money in the process. So to that end, I'm very pleased to introduce you to our two expert panelists. We got Allan Macdonald. Allan's the owner of Industrial Employee Safety, that provides safety education to professionals and to clients that are looking to provide quality safety training to their staff. So industrial safety has been operating in Canada since 2014 and has since earned a leading reputation of quality, reliability, and dependability in employee safety training. He's also been an emergency response volunteer for the past 25 years. So we're looking to hear some interesting stories a little later here on. Daniel Kempling. So Daniel is a safety coordinator for the County of Northern Lights, as well as a director of emergency management as part of the Alberta Task Force 1. And so he functions as a safety officer there. Daniel has an extensive background in managing safety in all sorts of environments. He's got an excellent firsthand experience in the dangers of not implementing sufficient safety programs. And as an aside, he's also a 6th degree black belt in Aikido, which has actually had a lot of crossover and cross-training towards the way that he approaches safety. So I'm Zach Johnson, and I'm from KnowHow, where we make it really easy for every team member to instantly access free expert-built template processes from any device. So if your teams are following the process, it's easy to see on KnowHow and wherever you're located. So we're going to be going over safety processes today, but make sure to check out our COVID-19 processes as well as our operations, tech, marketing, management, sales, etc. We've got a swag of them. So before we get started, I want to thank a couple of industry partners. I want to thank Business Mentors, Restoration ERP, The Restoration Lawyer, AIM, IES Industrial Employee Safety, and Business Development Associates. So we'll jump right in here. We're going to kick things off with an opening question for our panelists. We'll start with Allan here, but before we jump in, a reminder to all that we're going to be talking about safety. And you can't talk about why you should wear a seatbelt without referring to car crashes once in a while. So as a disclaimer, we're going to be talking about some scenarios where things have gone horribly wrong. So the opening question to Allan, and then I'll pass it over to you, Dan, is without divulging names or things that you can't, what's the worst safety situation you've heard of or dealt with recently?
Well, to go right straight to your seatbelt thing, I spent 6 years on a fire department. One day we responded to 2 rollovers. One person belted in, walked away. One person not belted in, had the vehicle roll over them, and they went away in a different vehicle. More recently, that was about 7 years ago, but more recently, like Monday, I live in Calgary. I'm in the local big box store. Walk in, doing my thing, hear the beep, beep, beep of a scissor lift going up. And it's kind of whatever, they're doing their job. Get to the checkout and look over, and there's a guy 25 feet in the air in the scissor lift, no harness, standing on his toolbox with 1 foot on the mid-rail, getting himself a little bit higher to go look at whatever he was looking at. So I snapped a couple pictures, and the store and I are having a conversation about maybe an enhanced safety program.
Happens every day, sadly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, and you know, I've been doing this for a long time. I could fill the hour with stories, but Dan, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So many choices, so little time. True that. In my progression in the safety world, I was a medic and a rescue tech and then a rescue lead in confined space and high angle. I was leading a rescue team at a industrial facility, plywood manufacturer in Alberta, and asked to supply some laborers for, well, a little bit of cleanup, but also some confined space watch while they were going in. The plant workers were going in to do whatever they had to do to clean up these vessels. Get a call, because I was regional manager at the time. I get a call about 2 o'clock in the morning from one of the co-workers who were working graveyard, telling me that one of my safety watches had got something in his eye and they're waiting to get into the first aid room. I'm like, okay, how is it that a safety watch got something in his eye? Oh no, they asked him to go in and chip off some gunk because they were short-staffed. Okay, there's a whole bunch of wrong there about a safety watch going in and help expanding scope. I won't go into that. But anyway, he's chipping stuff off this. Get some goop bounce off his cheek. He doesn't have a shield. He's just got safety glasses. Get some goop that he's putting into his eye. Starts to irritate quickly. There's no eye washes anywhere to be found, but there is one in the first aid room. First aid room is locked because people might steal it. Nobody could find a key. So by this time, I'm waking up the safety coordinator going, I need an SDS on what that crap is that's in my man's eye and get him into the hospital tooth sweep. He says, oh, don't worry about it. We looked into it. It's fine if it's exposed to air. I said, it's in his eyeballs. It's in an aqueous solution. And I noticed there's a cyanide in it. You mind seeing how it does in water? 2 minutes later, he's like, oh, shit. So he did save his vision, my worker, but he had compromised vision for about 3 months. So the list of egregious breaches of protocol and agreement, pretty long in that. And there's a few more, but that's one example comes to mind, Zach.
No, I appreciate that. The reality is that I think that's a pretty good metaphor for a lot of how safety is looked at. We have it somewhere, but we're not totally sure how to access it when we need it. Yeah. It's locked away, it's in a manual, it's in a binder, and it might be somewhere at the bottom of my toolbox, my truck, the locked room. And so sadly, if it's not accessible, it's not useful.
Yeah. And it was also a comment on WHMIS for me too, about how little respect it gets in a lot of industrial environments. The importance of worker training for WHMIS and understanding cautionary statements, understanding how to access an SDS. It's an amazing amount of supervisory people and certain frontline people that they've taken the course, but they really don't know how to implement it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's problematic to even have have to go through a few different layers of people to be able to find the information. So one thing that KnowHow is aiming to improve is the capacity to pull up, whatever details about whatever chemical you've got on site instantly. We'll jump into kind of one of the first questions that we've got here from a listener. How do you conduct regular safety meetings that keep people paying attention? So maybe I'll go to you first, Daniel, this time.
No, that is the ongoing challenge, especially if you're doing a toolbox every morning, right? We all know the sound of getting tired of the sound of our own voice and watching the workers, jabbing their foreheads with pencils while you're talking about slips, trips, and falls. So yeah, been there for 1,000 of them. But a couple of my strategies are this. One, engage the workers. Make it timely. If there's something in the news, if there's something that happens on site, let's dig into it. And sometimes not just as an overview, hey, this is a bad thing, don't do it. But I'll sometimes go into principle-based stuff and make it more educational. In other words, we had an incident with a release of sulfur dioxide in this vessel. We got a 5-minute conversation getting into a little bit technically on how that's going to hurt your body and why you need to know about it. What are the risks? And guess what? On my next competency check, that question is going to be on your list. So one of the things I found is because I would often have ongoing competency checks, but I let people know that what I was telling them in the safety meetings would be part of their competency checks. So they got points for listening and implementing, right? And over time, I found it was a way for people to be motivated to start to lean into it and not just follow rules and check boxes, but to start to look for the underlying principles and going, oh yeah, the LELs went up because that guy's got a paint bomb, floor below me. Oh, that makes sense. As opposed to, oh, an alarm went off. What do I do, right? It helps people understand the principles of why they do what they do. And I think when you come across from a point of view of engagement and I like to treat everybody as motivated, intelligence adults until proven otherwise. It seems to get a good response.
Cool. So engagement is big, and then relevant topics. So
Yeah.
if there's something in the news, or, knock on wood, something happened recently, or even in an adjacent company or field, you bring that in.
You bet.
Awesome. Same question for you, Allan. How do you keep regular safety meetings high intent, or maybe not high intensity, but how do you keep the attention high?
Well, I'll often involve the participants themselves. So that if we're on a long-term job, I'll start doling out responsibilities. Okay, today or tomorrow, you got to give them some time. So tomorrow, you're going to talk about this. You're going to take this piece because we're doing whatever it is we're doing. And you're going to talk about this piece of our safety manual. And then, so if we can do this, we then shift the perception of a single person, lonely voice in the wilderness, screaming about safety, to a team that's now actively teaching each other about safety. So that, and if we can get that going, and of course combined with portions of what Daniel's doing, we bring this team together, because really we're a team getting a task done, or a project, a series of tasks. And those people that haven't been around wrecks and accidents and stuff like that don't have the appreciation for exactly how traumatic that is to everybody else, as opposed to, obviously the person that the occurrence had is going to feel some pain one way or the other. But there's a whole psychological end of it that we have to deal with.
That makes sense. Yeah, so really unifying people around it and then getting them all on the same page. To that end, I mean, there's the carrot and the stick, but how do you keep the stick front of mind? How do you enforce and keep disciplinary policies there and active? So, Allan. Yeah.
I'll do that in the same way. I'll bring it directly to their attention. So usually what we'll see is a progression. You start with little things get left, not addressed, and they develop into much larger issues. So on the little things, it's, hey, this is what the procedure is. This is what you should be doing. If you continue down this path, here's what's going to happen. And just having that short little conversation, so put your glasses on, put your hat on, gloves on, whatever it is. And just keep that small stuff small, and continually just say, hey, do you know that's immediate termination, by the way? So boot your passenger out of your truck and have him be your spotter to back up. Right? No, it's cold and rainy. Yeah, okay. So it's cold and rainy. Get out there and do your job. And, then sometimes just being direct is one of the best things you can do.
I appreciate that. Over to you, Daniel. Anything that you would add to that, to just keeping disciplinary policies front of mind? So if someone knows they might be
I have. I think that the one of the approaches that I take is when I'm doing orientations, when I'm first coming on to crews, they don't know me. They run across a lot of safety guys and often get lumped into a certain category of being an enforcer that's the daddy to make sure that you're not a misbehaving bad boy. All right, that's a vibe. It is a vibe people have. I take an approach when they're signing off to things. I have a conversation about ethics. I say, hey, you look like a man of your word, a woman of your word. I could pretty much, you say something, I could trust that. And people give you the head nod. I'm like, well, you know what? I view a signature the same as a promise. Right? So when you sign that, I want you to know that you're promising me and the rest of the crew that you're going to roll this way. So when it comes to an infraction, I call them to that point and say, hey, you gave me your word. You're not doing this. Did you either misunderstand or are you just being sketchy? Which is it? And do we need to have a conversation with your foreman, or can we settle this right here? Right? Can we come back to your agreement? And it works better than waving the finger at them and going, what the hell you think you're doing, man? Right? It's calling them back to agreement. And I find it really, it comes matter to you're calling on not so much obedience, but integrity. It's an appeal to personal integrity.
So you're grounding them in their ethics prior to anything, and then actually just referring back to it.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many examples of scoff laws in our life, whether it's paying all our taxes or obeying the speed limit. And so we have precedent in our life. We're going, oh yeah, it's written, but we don't really have to do it. I like to tell them, no, we're in a different category here. This is not speeding. This is not, hiding some tax revenue. This is life and death, right? And not just you, everybody around you. So we got to just, hold to the promise of the well-being of everybody around you. And I think when people start to look more outward, then it starts to be a little, I don't know if you could say, a little bit more of a noble pursuit to be compliant, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. It's not like jaywalking where you're probably the only one that's going to get hurt. This actually has an impact in the greater group. I'll throw the next question your way here. So this is maybe it's a little bit redundant, but what does regular training in a company, what does good regular training look like?
Well, I'm going to preface it by saying I view the role of safety coordinator, that's the people, not so much manager, but the actual boots on the ground safety coordinator, as coach, subject matter expert, motivator, professional nag, maybe. But when it comes to implementing, I look to the frontline leads as the guys that are the implementers. These are the guys that I focus on, right? So when I'm doing the toolbox in the morning, I might have an extra 5 minutes before or after with the leads, because I want them the workers looking to the leads as an example of how we're going to roll, because we're professional and we're proud of our work and we're going to keep every safe, as opposed to, here, let's avoid getting caught doing some sketchy stuff by the safety guy, right? It's a different vibe. So sort of a roundabout way of addressing training. Yes, there's ongoing training, there's compliance training, but the toolboxes, the site visits, the casual visits, the formal inspections, every one of those is a teachable moment. And once people get the idea that they're actually safe in making mistakes and safe in asking questions and have a common vision of moving forward to greater safety, tends to roll forward in a more wholesome way at that point.
Well, that's very interesting, because that's largely the way that corporate culture is designed. You have to get the alpha dogs on, and you have to get them perpetrating it, and making sure that people kind of follow along behind them. So that's a fascinating way of looking at it. And maybe I'll just go off script here a little bit, but I'm sure maybe you've noticed the flip side. If you don't have the foreman or the head guys that have clout, that have some level of status, if they're not following it, the rest of the herd probably doesn't line up.
And it makes for a miserable experience as a safety dude.
Allan, anything to add to that?
Yeah. Well, up to March of this year, this was the bread and butter of IES. We did compliance training, and I would have to say we unhappily did it. It's currently what we have. Go sit in the classroom for 6 or 8 hours and listen to some old guy flap his lips and read the PowerPoints to you and all that sort of stuff does not sit very well, because it doesn't give you good learning, doesn't give you good grounding. Your brain cannot stay engaged and listen to that monotone. Even if we're up and dancing around and doing several things, it's too long a point, and it's a single touch point. You're there for your day, and then you're off. So it becomes it gets the reputation for, oh, I got to do that. And like Daniel was saying, okay, so now you're the safety cop, right? There you go. All right, so this is the way I get a ticket so I can go do what I really want to do. And so with COVID-19, I've been working with Daniel and a couple other folks on another opportunity or method of presenting this material, and in a 2-minute a day mobile app, where we ask you questions, you give us answers. It tells you if you're right or wrong, and just keeps doing that until you get it all right. And then on those pieces where we need to do a proficiency assessment, where, do you know what a bad harness looks like and all that sort of stuff. We're going to go to site. We're going to show up at your site and going to say, okay, where's your harness? Oh, it's right there. Good. Pick it up, inspect it for me. Now put it on. And then see what they actually took away from everything. So that we're now in the field using your stuff at your job site and giving you the mentoring that honestly a lot of people need. I went across Canada with a major corporation doing fall protection training. 65% of the people in the class who had company issued fall protection had it on wrong, had the wrong size, had no idea how to adjust it. So when we got done doing that in a class, we go, oh, this isn't uncomfortable. Well, no, it's not. There's several millions of dollars that go into research every year to make these so you'll wear them. And that's, a good safety training program encompasses everything that Daniel talked about, and some sort of, at some point in time, we may get into a situation where I need this for tomorrow, or I need this for Friday, or whatever. Okay, well, you're back to the one-day training. We'll give you the information, but we're also going to give you an app to go with it, so that every day you answer 4 or 5 questions about what it is you're being safe about. So it's coming to you instead of you having to go to it.
That makes sense. It sounds like a little bit like the med school motto, where you watch one, do one, teach one. And you're saying, okay, after you watch me, I want you to see, I want to actually visually see you do it, and then explain to me why or why not it's wrong.
Yeah, and the other thing that we're finding is, in some certain situations, we could become a voice for that employee. Right? I've got nothing to lose by going to an employer and saying, hey, that stuff's junk. The employee says that, and he might be looking for a job. But, a knowledgeable, competent person saying, here's the problems with this. Here's your risk if you continue to give this to your people to use. It changes the conversation.
So you become an ally. with the employee.
Yeah.
Yes, and with people that get this, you've just become an ally with the employer because you just reduce his risk. You've just covered his butt in a place that might have been hanging out there quite a ways.
Well, that makes sense. Daniel, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's sufficient. What else got there?
Okay, cool. So that's interesting from just a proof perspective, because based on what I've read, even about people's capacity to sit in front of a screen or listen to a presentation, the retention is always under 20%. So forcing them to do it, to show it, to interact with it increases retention, which is
yes.
Well, I will say one thing about it, because this is a new product and I had some questions about it. So I actually test drove it, one of the programs that they first rolled out. It was Fall Pro, something I'm intimately familiar with. And the retention is actually remarkable. It is nothing to be compared to doing 6.5 hours under the fluorescent lights and getting your 80% right. I felt after 3 weeks of once a day, it's like, damn, I got this down. Like, I know everything and the thing is, one of the things I liked about it is it gives you a data point that nothing else is what is the employee confident about, but is in fact wrong. And to actually have that as a safety administrator, to have that data, man, that's golden. Man. That's one of the things I'm very attracted about the system that Allan was talking about here. Yeah.
Awesome. No, it's good to hear that even confirmed, because I think oftentimes it's, get people through it as fast as possible, as opposed to, hey, did you pick up on it? We just had a question come in here from a listener. What has the COVID pandemic changed about job site safety? So maybe I'll throw that one at you, Dan.
Oh boy. Okay, well, I don't know where to start with that. I'll start just the first thing that comes to mind, because I wear two hats. I'm also Director of Emergency Management. So as I was digesting the onset of it in Alberta, I realized it's really important to define a problem. And my problem actually isn't a pandemic. That's Alberta Health Services problem. My problem is 100% staff absenteeism, right, for critical roles. That's my job, right? And then there's all the OH&S stuff, because we're dealing with a communicable disease, right? So I won't get into all the mitigation controls and stuff like that. That's well published. There's tons of stuff that you can do. But what I'm more interested in at this point, Zach, is what you call caution fatigue, right? We're now 5-6 months into it, and this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. This is going to be a 2-year plus pain in the ass that we got to deal with. So what we're having to do is get people beyond, we're temporarily responding to a crisis, to, geez, we have got to permanently change our hygiene protocols and the way we roll, like as if it's forever, right? That's the attitude we have to have. It's not like, we're going to get over this, because you can see what's happening in the States, right? We're just about over it. Let's open up. It's a freaking disaster. So coming back to the job site, how to deal with it is similar to questions I think that you had around how to make safety meetings engaging. It's just to remind people you're not there just to protect yourself. You're there to protect, your buddy's grandmother. You're there to protect your buddy's wife that's got, CPD. You're there to protect anybody that's compromised. And again, it's a bit of an ethical appeal. And in the hardest part, whether you think it's a hoax or this or that, you got to bring people to the point is, we are serving the common good by doing this, because a lot of people can be very cavalier. I'll take my chances. I'll probably get by. Yeah, great. What about your family members that you're going to take down with you? So I'm not going to really get into the hygiene protocols. I'm just talking about how I frame it in the conversation with my team.
Okay. And the big maybe shift there is recognizing that if people think it's going to be a small thing, a sprint, that they're going to actually set it up differently than if they just kind of lock in to the fact that this is, this is almost a permanent shift, or they should view it as such.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's inconvenient and it's unfair and it's all those things. And it's what we got.
You got to dance with the one that you brung to the ball.
You got her.
Allan, anything to add in and around how the COVID pandemic has changed job site safety?
I probably not a whole bunch, other than this is like an ultra marathon. I saw a little news item today on in the morning here. IATA, which is the International Aviation Transportation Administration, says air traffic won't be back to 2018 levels until 2024. We're in this for a long time. And this isn't an inconvenience. It's a complete change in our working ability. It's the same order as when we put seatbelts in. I spent most of my youth without seatbelts. And when that came along, there was a lot of resistance until people figured it out. So we're in an interesting era of communication, and we do have to be very careful that we don't fall into that fatigue trap that Dan spoke about. We need to stay focused on this because we actually don't know anything about COVID-19. There's all kinds of stuff about kidneys and hearts and lungs, and we don't really know actually what's going to happen. So best to not be that adventuresome with our society.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I think that's a shift for people, is just to kind of understand that there's a permanent aspect to it, because that keeps it front of mind, but it also keeps them from thinking, well, when's it gonna pass? When's it gonna be done? And the answer is it's not going to be done in a way that it was, like you said, in 2018 for the foreseeable future. So don't even ask that question.
Well, yeah, there's another point I think I'd like to make about that too, is because it's invisible, because it has a time lag for effect, it's hard for people to appreciate the risk of it. But when you think of the odds, if it gets into the office, what are the odds it's going to spread through, and what are the odds that you're going to have, maybe 5% of your staff die. If you look at that from an OH&S hazard assessment point of view, that's right into the red full stop. Right? It is. It's huge compared to the safety mitigation things we have into, say for example, something like H2S release, or some of the things where we've got huge safety factors built in, and industrial workers accept it. They go, oh yeah, that's bad. That could be really bad if that happens. So we've got multiple layers of, sometimes almost, it could be argued, excessive safety to make sure that doesn't happen. We're talking like 50-50 chance that you're going to get sick and that some of your coworkers are going to die within a month. I mean, that's huge. But you can see it's hard for people to compare the relative risk because it's a new beast. But from a point of view of an OH&S hazard assessment, this is in the top right of the hazard matrix, right? It really is. As far as frequency, severity, and probability, it's all up in the threes, right? So I think people have to be reminded that this isn't separate from our usual way of doing hazard assessments. This is pretty clearly has some very clear threats and high probability of getting you. Yeah.
So when it's even compared from a graph perspective to other injuries or hazards on a workplace, it's more easily understood.
Oh yeah. I mean, thankfully we have very few fall to the deaths, even though we, you know, through many, many years of teaching fall protection and all that, we will have a handful a year in the country, thankfully, and hopefully none eventually. We've already got close to 10,000 dead in our country from COVID. I mean, wow. I mean, but again, you can see it is a perception thing. It is a challenge in perception. And I think the communication aspect of it is going to be one of our biggest challenges, is just bringing people back to, hey, we don't need to freak out. What we do need to be is have a coherent plan that is practicable and sustainable, right?
Yeah. And then just to piggyback on that with Dan, we're doing this in a time of instant gratification. And those two things are just not the same beast. So it's very difficult to get back into the long game, because that's what we're in with this.
Yeah.
Right. This has to be just part of a daily habit, like brushing your teeth. And it's not going to be a lot of fun while you're doing it. And it's not going to be, there's lots more entertaining things to do. But you're saying it's something that, you know, it's got to be front of mind, and it really is challenging when, wow, there's a lot of conflicting information floating around too.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a question from a viewer here, and maybe I'll throw it your way, Allan. If you could speak to the safety of wearing a mask during work hours or on site.
We definitively cannot say how safe it is or isn't. Because how long has it been since it showed up? At best,
4 months.
8 months. 8 months. We'll see. Push it back to December, maybe.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, we just don't know. There's when this first came out, we put together a quick COVID thing, and for 3 weeks there are major changes every day. It's like, what's the WHO say now? What's the CDC say? What's our own Health Canada saying? And so with the safety of wearing a mask, it's like the safety of wearing any other PPE that we wear. If it creates a bigger hazard, you need to look at it and reassess what it is you're doing. One of the best examples of that is in confined spaces. We used to tie a person to a rope, and then he would go into that space, no matter what. That worked in big open spaces. But when you have all kinds of twists and turns and things running up and down, all you do is wind that rope around so that guy can't actually move and create a big hazard. So don't do that. If you're wearing a mask, understand that touching the outside of that mask and then rubbing your eyes without a hand washing in between is exposing you to risk. Not using a mask, it appears, exposes everybody else to a risk that's within 6 to 10 feet of you, because now there's some debate about 6 feet even, and so now we're putting X number of people at risk. There's all kinds of stuff coming out now about high touch surfaces. How often do you disinfect those? And disinfect as opposed to sanitize. So there's a little bit of vocabulary that comes in there that for the most part our viewers will understand. But looking at all of this, it's just like, well, COVID-19 isn't well defined. It's not nearly as well defined as, say, fall protection. If you step off a roof, I can tell you what's going to happen and how much it's going to hurt. But for a large part of it, we simply don't know. If you're using a mask and it's not creating a larger hazard, then continue to use it. That seems to be the best information out there at the moment.
So yeah, it's challenging to stay up to date on like the guidelines through the IRCRC or OSHA or EDC, and making sure that you're looking at the most relevant piece of information as this changes consistently. So that's something that KnowHow helps with, and that's where we're moving towards, having the most relevant data kind of in the palm of your hand. Over to Daniel, maybe. Is there anything you want to add in and around kind of the safety of wearing a mask?
Yeah, I had to make a decision because I had to write policies very freshly in the last few months. So I've spent a fair bit of time typing these things in and researching. I'm not going to talk about general. I'm going to talk about a specific application I had to make a decision on. And the decision we made to the best of our ability, only one person at a time in pickup trucks. Obviously, you're in a confined space. If they are in a pickup truck together, what the management is suggesting is, we'll make sure they're double cabs and they're in the corner, one's in the back and one's driving, and then they're go off in the view thing and they're going to wear masks all day. And that's going to be our mitigation. That's our control. I'm like, no, it's not going to work. Once they're out of sight, these are young people working into it. Are you going to tell me they're never going to share the same steering wheel? Tell me they're never going to take off their mask during that 8 hours? Tell me you're not even going to maybe bum a smoke from the other guy? Seriously, I had to look at it and go, that is not practicable. It is not enforceable. There's no way to do it. So I do have times where I do ask people to wear masks if social distancing isn't possible. But in cases like that, I made pods of workers that work together without masks, but with an understanding if one went down, they both went down for the quarantine period. And so what I did was I isolated pockets of people because I did not trust the mask as an effective control, just from my experience with human behavior. And I have a fair bit of experience, like as a rescue tech. I know a lot about donning and doffing and hygiene protocols. And I was playing with it with myself and another coworker for a while. I couldn't pull it off for a day, honestly, Zach. I could not pull off meticulous hygiene protocols in the donning and doffing of my mask, and I'm good at it. And that's where I made a decision that in some cases, it's not the best choice because it won't be done properly, and you're relying on that as your last line of defense, and it's impractical. That's my take on it.
No, that makes sense. It reminds me of, I was watching the news the other day and they were getting an NBA game started and they let one player go. They were all quarantining together. They let one player go to a funeral and the player decided on the way back that he'd stop at, it was a strip club in this case. And then he got 5 or 6 other players infected because it's the reality of, hey, this is what you have to do and this is what you should do. And the should is, like you said, super hard to enforce.
Yeah. So, yeah. And that's a little bit of a slippery slope from a safety guy's point of view, I got to tell you. And I've run into this before on site where I say, this is what it says, knowing full well it's unenforceable and won't be implemented. And so when you make an argument for a variation for, a compliance directive, you get yourself into some very interesting conversations, both with workers and with management and other safety colleagues. But I think we need to have these conversations. We need to have the courage to have these conversations because we're dealing with a new beast. And we need everybody's input, right?
Absolutely. It's a constantly evolving thing. So that is, and it's part of the problem too, is that it's not something that doesn't have consequences either way. It's evolving, and there's pros and cons for loosening and tightening all sorts of restrictions. So the next question that's come up here from a viewer is, we've touched on it, but in your experience, what is the number one reason? So maybe I'll just throw it back your way, Daniel, that most people don't follow a safety policy or stop following one.
It's not the most important thing to them. I mean, just bluntly, it is not the most important thing to them. People do what's important to them. You want to, you know, people will tell you what's important to them, but if you really want to know what's important to them, watch what they do over time, right? So there could be a whole bunch of motivations. Maybe they're just a sketchy dude and they've got no interest in following safety. That's very rare. A lot of it is complacency. And a lot of it is just not understanding why. I've done this for 25 years. Why the hell do I have to do this extra thing? You know, blah, blah, blah. So not following it is they just don't buy in. If they buy in, if they believe, if they're sold on it, people of integrity will follow, right? So it's in the conversation of at what point, right, in the change of culture, not being imposed on them, where they kind of go, yeah, you know, an actual real walk around on my rig is probably worth it, you know, like a real one, not just a bullshit box checker. Maybe a real one is worth it. And when you get to there, then you don't have to push them anymore. And you may find that they're actually motivating the green hands to follow the same way. But yeah, that's my take on it in a brief way.
No, there's maybe a war of attrition is in there as well, but if it's not important, it just doesn't get done. Yeah. Allan, in your experience, what's the reason that kind of people stop or don't pick up safety protocols?
I think it's if we speak in, I've been around long enough that I've seen a change in the safety world. In fact, I've seen a change in the whole industrial processes. When I was eons ago in my teenage years, I was in a cabinet making shop with German journeymen. And it didn't matter what you were doing. If you're doing it wrong, there was somebody there to say, hey, you need to do this right. That has gone away. I don't know what happened, where it went. It's disappeared. And we don't mentor, we get the job done. So it's a focus has become on the end point rather than the journey to get there. And what's happened in the safety industry is we have become box checkers. Right? Go to a course, check a box off. Right? Okay. Fill the FLHA out. Yep, there it is. Check that box off. Right? If you look at your FLHA, your hazard assessment, what's on the hazard assessment? A bunch of boxes to check. So people are not thinking about what they're doing. And by not thinking about what's coming up, they're somehow surprised when it reaches around the corner and slaps them hard. And it's going to take work on the behalf of society to change that. And that's part of what's motivated us to take on this second company. Is we need people to start understanding what it is that they're doing, and just how fast a piece of wood comes back at you out of a 5 horsepower direct drive table saw, and it's coming back with force and speed. I experienced that at 21. I was working in a cabinet making shop in Vancouver. We were making wedges for the shipbuilding industry. Okay, so we got a load of ironwood in. Okay, and it was a 6 by 6 by 6 foot long piece of ironwood. It took 8 guys to lift it onto the table. It's heavy. And you crank up this 5 horsepower direct drive saw that's got a blade that looks like it'll eat cars. And you start making wedges with it. A 5 horsepower direct drive saw never jams. It never stops. So it had a little twist in something. It was out of the saw and past my shoulder before I had a chance to even blink. The guys heard the saw start to power down, and they knew what was coming. It happened in less than a second. And then we had to patch the concrete wall because that's what put the wood through.
Wow.
Didn't hurt the wood. It's ironwood. 6 of us went over, picked it up, brought it back. But because we're in a rush to get stuff done, you have to be very, we've lost that stop and look. Just on another quick point here, I know we don't have a lot of time. I had a friend of mine that's a professional firefighter. He went to Japan just on a trip, stopped in a firehouse because that's what we do. They had a call, and he's kind of watching what goes on. The bells go off, guys jump in the truck, and nothing happens for 10 seconds. And then the truck goes. So he turns to his guy and goes, "What was that all about?" The guy goes, "What?" "Well, they got in the truck and then it never went anywhere." That's because when we get in the truck, we take a 10-second break. So we stop thinking about what we were doing and start thinking about where we're going. And we show up far better prepared. And we have way less accidents. So it's that slowing down to go faster. And that's going to take some effort on senior management to instill that.
Not just going through the motions, not having somebody who can just hit all the boxes, but then the realistic application suffers massively.
Oh, sure it does. Yeah, absolutely.
If I may just jump in on this one point, is that all right?
Absolutely.
This one, we've talked a lot about the worker and the supervisory level, but my experience with a lot of the management and those people that write the checks and they're looking for the profit is we have this, what I call an eternal tension between safety and production. We've all dealt with that. It's not going away. The more progressive people that I've worked for and contract to understand that safety is really part of the spectrum of risk management. Okay? And this is one of the things I think in talking to the business people, the leadership, is to get this idea that safety is an add-on, an irritant to get us through. No, this is an integral part of your entire operations risk management, right? And we can pull up all sorts of stats on what it's going to cost you if it goes wrong. But if you crunch the numbers and you give it to the guy that went to school for 6 years to crunch number and you put it in front of him, it's a no-brainer of implementing these type of progressive and practicable safety programs. It's the return it's unquestionable. And as well as staff morale, because one of the things we're dealing with is huge amount of stress related stuff too, but that's a whole nother topic. But it's part of that spectrum of them appreciating that safety is just built into us getting this job done properly, period. It's not, oh, and let's be safe. No, this is how you do the job, period. And that may seem oversimplistic, but I see it missing a lot.
The ROI is it's always worth it, and it's always significantly better than bankruptcy or massive injuries that get in the world of social media and cancel culture. If you have a poor safety policy, the world's going to know about it right away, and it's not going to be a place that people want to work. So no, hey, I really appreciate that, because it gives it a nice way of tying together our conversation for today. The understanding that there's a lot of ways to justify not doing it in the moment, but looking at it from a macro perspective and going, hey, if we don't fix some of these things, it could be, we've got to shut down because the legal issues are too bad, or, a worst case scenario is actually having people get seriously injured or dying. So we're gonna close out here for today. So if you don't have an expert built process for how to run a safety meeting or issue a citation for a violation, we want to provide you with a free digital template today. So simply take a moment to let us know in the chat box, and we'll make sure to get that right into your hands. We've also got a link that you can click there as well. We want to thank both of our panelists. So thanks very much to Daniel and Allan today for answering all the questions that we had and providing us with some practical advice. I hope that everyone listening is going to join us for our next webinar here on August 5th. So we're going to have an in-depth discussion. Make sure to sign up for the webinar. There's a link that we'll throw into the chat box, and again at the bottom of the screen. We want to thank our industry partners. So thanks again to Business Mentors. If you need a strategy to win during this pandemic, businessmentors.net, place to go. If you don't have COVID service contracts, you can talk to the restoration lawyer. If you need an easy way to review your quote, you can talk to Ask Amy Instant Estimate Review. If you need a tool to boost your sales, Restoration ERP is the software for you. And we also want to thank Business Development Associates and Industrial Employee Safety. From all of us at KnowHow, thanks very much for joining us.